Hello, folks. Today, in this little mini lesson from Adrian, we're going to talk about one of the biggest questions that I get from my students, namely my guitar students. One thing that I'm almost always asked is, why is it important to learn your scales? Why do I need to know scales? Why do I have to practice this? Why does that matter? Why does this matter? Why do I need to know that? That's boring and it's stupid and I don't like it. Let me tell you why. First and foremost, the musical scale is basically the absolute foundation of everything that you will ever play. Even if you're doing some incredibly obscure tech metal, you still have scales as a reference point for what you're making. But realistically, the majority of music is built out of scale systems. The scale is going to determine what chords are going to be played, what chords will sound good together in the context that you're playing, and it'll determine what notes are going to sound good with what chords, what notes you can use when you're making a solo, all that sort of stuff. And it's sort of like a guideline to say, here, if you follow these rules and you follow these notes, pretty much everything you're going to do is going to fall in line and sound good. Now, it's not to say that you should always be sticking with particular scale systems. There are so many different scales that you can use and different ways that you can manipulate them. But the whole idea is that you have to learn the scales and understand their structure in order to be able to understand how you can break the rules. So one of the big things is understanding the chords that work with scales. Every scale has a set series of chords that it can provide you within the certain rules of the scale. Now, obviously, you can use whatever chords you want, whenever you want, but with each major scale, for example, the first chord is going to be major. So in A major, first chord is A. The second chord in any major scale is going to be minor. So is the third one. The fourth will also be major, and then major, minor, then diminished, and then major again. And as long as you stick with that system, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a chord that's going to fit with the notes. Now, obviously, there are ways to break that convention, playing chords that don't fit in with that. Just as one example, or there are lots of different things you can do, but you have to really understand those systems to be able to manipulate them properly and know ahead of time what sorts of things are going to sound good. But the whole thing is, like, the scales are just, they're fundamental. It is one of the most crucial and important pieces of information for playing music, because everything that you're going to play is based out of the scale. Your chords, your melodies, your harmonies, your solos, your everything. It's all based on the scale, pretty much. So it's really important to learn them. And one of the analogies I like to use with my students who are questioning this is, imagine that you're learning to play guitar without scales, or without even an understanding of how scales work and why they exist. It's like trying to learn how to do multiplication without having first learned addition. So yes, you can memorize your multiplication tables. You know, I can know that 4 by 4 is 16, and I can know that 10 by 10 is 100, right? But if I don't already understand addition, then I'm only going to be able to memorize those systems. So if someone says to me, what's 5 times 5? I'll say, well, it's 25. Well, how come? I'll be like, I don't know, because it is. But if I understand addition, I'll know that, well, I'm taking 5 groups of 5 and putting them together, so I make 10, 15, 20, and 25. And it's the same thing with scales. Sure, you can learn how to play a whole bunch of songs on guitar just by memory. But I know I just played that wrong. But still, I can memorize that and have absolutely no understanding of anything that I just played. I can have no idea that that was an E chord that I started with and then I went to a G, and have no idea what I'm doing. But, if I were to go in and write a song and I already understand, I want to use E minor because I like this chord. I want to write a song in E minor. And I know that the notes available to me in E minor are these. And I know that there's going to be certain chords that will definitely work, which would be these. I'm going to have a much easier time writing and understanding that song, or even, learning other songs and adapting to other musical things. So what's a good way to practice and learn your scales? Because there are so many of them, and they are really important. They're also really good just as finger exercises too, so you can kind of kill two birds with one stone when you're learning scales. The way I like to do it is I like to take one scale a day and spend 5 or 10 minutes with it, just moving it around the fretboard and playing it in different octaves and in different patterns. So let's say today I wanted to take the Lydian scale, which is one of my favorites. I'm going to say, okay, well, I'll play it over here. I'll start on G sharp. Maybe I'll play it in 2 octaves. Maybe I'll find a way that I can slide it over in different positions. Or maybe I want to play it on F sharp. Maybe I want to know that I can play it on F sharp in different places as well. So I'll just go through, I'll take one scale and spend 5 or 10 minutes with it fooling around in as many positions as I can to get really familiar with it. And one thing to remember when it comes to scales and modes is, and I get this a lot when I try to teach a student a new scale, they're like, oh, how am I going to remember this one? It's new and it's different and there's all these different notes in it. The majority of scales that I deal with are, well, they can be viewed as alterations of the standard major and minor scales. So like if you look at just the modes of the major scale, for example, the Dorian mode is just like minor but with a raised sixth, and then the Phrygian mode is just like minor but with a flat 2. You can think of scales that way, like the harmonic minor scale is just like the minor scale but with a raised 7th. So if you think about that, when you go to learn a new scale, let's say I had never played Lydian before, I would say, well, I already know how to play major, because that's pretty much the first scale that anybody's going to learn. And all I have to know is that Lydian is just like major, but with a raised 4th. Oh, okay, well, I'll raise the 4th note in my scale pattern. And now I'm playing a new system. Although, technically I had made very little alteration and I hardly had to learn anything new about it. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Scales are important. You should practice them and learn as many as you can.